Have you ever had a time in your life where nothing is going right and everything just keeps going wrong? This is how people felt during the Great Depression. Although the crisis lasted for over a decade, they eventually got through this hard time and things got better. The Great Depression was a challenging time for people to get through and had an effect on many people's way of life. I have researched the topic and heard many stories about this time period from my grandparents. It is always good to know about the history, especially a time that had this much of an impact, this much of an effect on the economy and people's lifestyles. Also, it shows that even when things are bad, they will eventually get better. It just may take a little time. Today I'm going to talk about the Great Depression, how it started, what happened during the Great Depression, and how it ended. The Great Depression had a worldwide effect, but it started in America due to the stock market crash in 1929. According to the journal Revisiting the Great Depression, from October 23rd to November 13th, Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped from 40%, from 327 to 199. Although the stock market crash was not the sole reason of the Great Depression, it definitely was a big factor because it caused people to feel uncertain, which caused people to cut back on spending, which hurt the economy even more. Then, to make a bad situation even worse, a major drought took place in the Great Plains during the same time, which was called the Dust Bowl. Many things occurred because of the Great Depression. Investors and brokers were not able to pay their debts, companies went bankrupt, unemployment rose, people went to desperate measures to get by. The journal Revisiting the Great Depression states, from 1930 to 1939, the U.S. unemployment rate averaged 14%. The peak rate in 1932 was 23%. According to the article, What Ended the Great Depression? In April 1939, almost 10 years after the crisis began, more than 1 in 5 Americans still could not find work. To make this situation even worse, in the Great Plains they were suffering what is known as the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl is a familiar topic around here since we are an agricultural-based state. The Dust Bowl was a period which happened to occur during the same time as the Great Depression. The Dust Bowl was a time in which a huge drought occurred, and the topsoil was so dry that the wind would just blow the dirt around, which would create dust storms. This drought had a huge effect on the farming population, because since this was such a rough time, many farmers could not make it. According to Dusty Volumes, Environmental Disaster and Economic Collapse in the 1930s, when droughts seared the plains during the 1930s, the farm population of 40 Dust Bowl counties declined by 3% from 1930 to 1935. But from 1935 to 1937, under the full impact of the black blizzards, the population plummeted by 34%. Dusty Volumes, Environmental Disaster and Economic Collapse in the 1930s also states that the wind rewarded those who stayed with higher rates of infant mortality, respiratory illnesses, and unquantifiable despair. There was just no winning during this time period and was a very rough time in people's lives. One of the biggest contributors to the end of the Great Depression was the New Deal. The journal How Successful Was the New Deal? The Microeconomics Impact of New Deal Spending and Lending Policies in the 1930s states, in response to the worst depression in American history, Franklin Roosevelt and a largely Democratic Congress established a broad range of spending and lending programs and new regulations that became collectively known as the New Deal. Dozens of New Deal policies were put into effect, each had a specific role to deal with specific problems. A main focus for the policies was the unemployed and to help sustain them, along with expanding public works. Another main focus was for the farmers in creating subsidy policies that would help them through this tough time with the drought and Great Depression. These subsidies for farmers still remain in effect today. Another big factor on the ending of the Great Depression was the end of World War II. According to the journal, What Ended the Great Depression? During the war, more than 12 million Americans were sent into the military, and a similar number toiled in defense-related jobs. Those war jobs seemingly took care of the 17 million unemployed in 1939. Most historians have therefore cited the massive spending during wartime as the event that ended the Great Depression. In conclusion, today I explained how the Great Depression started, what happened during the Great Depression, and how it ended. The Great Depression was a significant time in our history. It made living for many people difficult, and many people had to change their lifestyle to adjust to the economic devastation. So just remember, if you are having a tough day, just think about the people who had to live through the Great Depression